Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of SuperNova Commencements. I am your host, Kashi Sehgal, and I am very excited to have you with us today. I hope your weeks are all going great and that the semester is off to a good start. We are streaming live on all the platforms. So shout out to all of you watching. Our guest today is so awesome. We're going to skip our usual segment, which is our Steppingblocks, our segment brought to us by our partner at Steppingblocks, our career powered by data. You all should take this opportunity to go over to their website and check out the careers. Yes, I said multiple careers that we are talking about today. But I want to make sure we get to our guest day and have plenty of time for her. So I want to bring her on screen. We are excited to have Cynthia Hardy with us today. Hi, Cynthia.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hi. So, y'all, Cynthia is amazing. Okay. She is founder and CEO of Pivot Global, which is an organization she started, and we're going to talk more about that. She is the author of a new book. We are also going to talk about that in depth, so get ready for that. And she has had a long career in the corporate world. So there's a lot of different aspects to having a career that she can talk with us about today. So, Cynthia, let's dive right in. Where are you from, and where did you go to school?
I am from Meridians, Mississippi, and I went to college at Xavier University in New Orleans, and then on to law school at the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana.
Okay, so what did you major in at Xavier?
Economics.
Economics, and then became a lawyer.
Yes.
How did that happen?
By chance. I originally actually thought I would be a journalist. I had been working in journalism and then as a freelancer. Then I realized that's not what I wanted to do. But it was a way for me to have sideline jobs as a writer and make money in school and law school. But I loved economics, and it was a PhD in economics or law school. And I decided on law school and never looked back.
PhD in economics, huh? That would have been pretty interesting given what's going on today, but I'm sure law is too. So, Cynthia, could you walk us through how you got from law school to where you are today, just kind of high level?
Well, I don't really think about this often, right? So as you're asking the question, it makes me go back. And I was focused after law school on, quite honestly, getting a job to pay bills. And I didn't know about a career path and how you structure a career. So I went to at the time, second largest law firm in the world, Jones Day, Revis and Pogue. It was based in Cleveland, Ohio. So I didn't know anyone, decided to go there for the best training that I could get as an attorney. And I truly believe that that is what happened. It was a marvelous experience. I learned a tremendous amount from really good attorneys. And those are all corporate clients. And a few years into it, I decided to move into a corporation. And so I went to Progressive Insurance, who was looking to bring in, they had a division that wrote professional liability coverages on banks. So any way a bank could be sued, D&O, any way they could lose money. So trust errors and omissions, a banker's blanket bond. And so attorneys came in from law firms, and we began to handle the claims from the time a notice is given to a coverage decision and maybe some subrogation. Absolutely loved it. And during that time frame, began to understand the business side, underwriting and all the other components. And over time, I actually moved into the business side, where I moved to the R&D department to really learn the quant side of the business and the product side. And then I began running businesses, the profit and loss of those businesses for Progressive, and then at 5 other companies, which then led to larger leadership roles, becoming president of those organizations and leading them. Sometimes involving turnaround, but it's all kind of pieces of a puzzle. where it's the people and how you get the work done, and what outcomes you're trying to bring and how you bring people along. That has been what's enticed me. And then doing that for myself. So having done it for years in organizations and enjoying it, decided, why not try this and work with clients, reshaping what they do around people and process driven solutions. And by the way, get to build a culture in an organization and set the pace also at the same time. And that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years within Pivot. So it's been great. Now, underlying that, so that's a career path. Underlying that, which for me is equally as important, is service on board, service in the community, all of which, by the way, allows you to also gain skills, build networks, right? So that's been pervasive, and I do that focused on the things that I'm passionate about.
Awesome. And you also wrote a book. And so we're going to talk about that. Became an author. You couldn't stop at just starting your own company, right? So let's talk a little bit about your career in the corporate world for a little while. So you were with insurance, you mentioned, and how did you navigate your career through the corporate world? What did you feel like the biggest lesson is that you took away from your corporate experience?
I think the biggest lesson is twofold. One, you have to continually figure out what you need to gain in terms of skills, because you're always focused on doing the job well, and that individual excellence is important. But you have to continually do this because at some point you transition from being a great solo contributor to being a leader. There's another set of skills that you have to acquire. And so it's not just that you have worked hard, maybe you've gotten your graduate degree while you're in your first or second job. You're going to have to continue to learn along the way. And that's number one, in order to have the skills and be relevant and advance. And number two, to be successful, you have to ask for help. And I've seen that time and time again. You are clear about what you know and what you're learning, and also what you don't know. And you find people who are great at what you're trying to acquire in terms of skills and capabilities. And you ask for help. And I've never seen anyone that says no when someone has approached them to say, I need help, but you need to be specific about what that means. So are you asking for a mentoring relationship? Are you asking for some coaching? What is it, and how can I help you? When you help people understand how they can help you, they will say yes. But that help could be substantive around the work you're doing. It could be organizational in terms of understanding how you navigate that organization. It could be around networks that allow you to have broader reach inside and outside of the organization to resources. It could be on a number of different levels. But keeping your eyes and ears open to what you need to learn, relationships you need to have, how you need to navigate, and how you ask for help to make that happen, I think will make a difference in success or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And what Cynthia said about constantly learning, if you're assessing what you need to learn, then you can better ask for help.
Yes.
You can't just say, I need help. I mean, you can, but like it's much more effective if you go to someone and say, I need help with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so
that takes self-awareness too.
Yeah. How do you build that skill? I mean, how do you become that introspective?
We're going to talk about the book a little bit, and I'll talk about it more then. But I think you have to demand of yourself honesty. And that honesty says, here's the situation I'm in. Here's what I think is needed to be successful. Here's where I am. Here's where I want to be. Now, to get there, I can do maybe this part on my own, but this part is because I need help. This awareness comes from what you know about yourself. It comes from feedback that you get from others. And there are some direct feedback mechanisms, and then there are indirect things. So you've got to be able to distill what you see and hear and the interactions in addition to the concrete things. And I always say, for instance, when it comes to feedback, one, you have to ask for it. And two, I sometimes see that people get feedback and then they want to parse through it and challenge you and say, well, that's not true, or that doesn't apply to me. I say, don't spend your time on that. Take it all as a gift.
Yeah.
And when you get that feedback, you do something with it. You can't address every single piece of it, but pick one or two things and say, I've seen this. This feedback has been reinforced. It's important. I'm going to work on it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So taking feedback and knowing that you can't do it all yourself are both very important things, but I feel like this transitions us very well into talking about how you started your first business or your business. Entrepreneurs often think that they can do it all themselves, and that's a trap, right? But please tell us about your experience with actually starting the business. Why did you start it after being so successful in the corporate world? And how did you figure it out? How did you navigate how to start HR and payroll and all of those things, all the business things that you never think about?
Why I started it, I had been for several years working on the side with friends who were starting businesses. And so I was helping them incubate these businesses, figure out what they were going to sell, who they were selling it to, their business plans, how to best position them over time to have the highest multiple of EBITDA to sell the business, right? And I loved it. And so I knew that there was a path that I wanted to explore around this. And I then began to think about, for what I was doing every day, what were the gaps in people that were helping organizations get better. And often I saw a gap around putting the customer first. So I'm a consultant working with an organization, but I had hired every kind of consulting organization you can imagine, right? I got great output, but often the customer, my customer, and me as a customer and my customers was an afterthought. So I thought, if you were to take every single customer that you had and you knew them and their customers and you put that first, the lens through which you solve their problems significantly changes. And then I also knew that when you were working with professionals who were helping you, when they gave you their solutions and left, you're left holding the bag saying, how do I implement this? And these are individuals who also have a lot going on. So I thought, okay, it's going to be really important to be able to work with leaders during the course of an engagement around change and solutions, but work with them to kind of change their DNA so they can sustain the work. Give them tools, but then also how you diagnose, how you problem solve, how you come up with solutions, and how you come up with permanent change that sticks. That's the stuff that you got to think about having staying power after we're done working with them. So having worked with others, having some clear thoughts about the gaps, I thought, okay, I want to do it. And how I did it was really interesting, because coming from a background of very large companies, right, you immediately realize there is nobody do anything but you. So all of a sudden, I'm spending half a day trying to figure out this crazy printer. So you move through all of that, but I knew that I wanted to ensure that, one, the company was virtual when it was set up. I thought it was the way of working, not only at that time, but it would be for the future. And so that meant that I needed to think about what software was out there, what APIs, what connectivity could there be that would allow us to work seamlessly and support our clients seamlessly. So that was one guiding principle. And it was great because, things like, right, DocuSign, all the things that we kind of take for granted now weren't necessarily being used then, but I was rabid about putting all of that in place for our back office. I wanted to make sure that I could variabilize costs too, right? So if everything was fixed cost, I was going to have a problem. So really thinking about, how do I make that happen with the people I was working with, and the support that I provided for them. Technology was also an enabler. I had tremendous help from a number of people. And I quite honestly couldn't have done it. And I still rely on those people and an amazing group of informal advisors in a kitchen cabinet, if you will. And I'd say to them, I don't know. I have no clue. I need a logo, right? I need this. All of these things that are basic, I had no clue about. And so what I did was tap into people who had done this before. And either in terms of setting up the business, getting a bead on clients and developing clients, thinking about how it is that you build a brand. Every aspect of the business, I had help from others. And that's been sustaining help. And I'm deeply indebted to those folks. I don't think I could have done it without it because there's so much you don't know.
Right.
But people, again, are always willing to help if the ask is clear.
I just want to go back to one thing you said. Could you explain the difference for our students between a fixed cost and a variable cost?
Oh, yes. Okay, so let me give you some examples around that. So we have a blend of full-time employees, fixed costs, right? We're going to have to pay X amount to those people. And regardless of how much business we write, that's got to be paid, right? We have some other expenses, let's say on a monthly basis, that we pretty much know what it is. It's got to be paid. It's fixed. Variable,
like the lights or electricity, all
utilities
that.
might be an example, right? Some other stuff that might be tied, like insurance, right? It's going to be a set amount. We know what that is in a given year for our liability coverage, right? General liability, professional liability. You have some of those expenses that, and as an individual student, you have them. So you've got rent, right? You've got your utilities, you've got food. Those are things that have to be paid.
Tuition.
They won't change, right?
They might go up, but
yeah. So in a business, you think about variable costs, which says how much I pay for this expense. My out-of-pocket depends on how much revenue I have coming in. So I wanted to try to what I call variabilized costs. So the more fixed cost I've got, that's a tough burden, right? So the more I can variabilize costs and say my cost is tied to how much revenue I have coming in. And so if revenue is down, my costs are down, right? Revenue's up, my costs are up. So that is how you're thinking about what I call the accordion part of expenses and being really, really smart about how you can make that happen. So we have a blend of fixed expense, keeping it as low as possible, and variable expense that can move with the revenue. Now, if you're trying to scale an organization, you want to, what we have, your variable cost is I'm growing more revenue. My variable costs are going to go up, but they're not going to go up by 10, 15x, right? Because I've been smart about thinking about how can I put more volume through without having my expenses go up in the same proportion. So it's a great question, but it's something you want to think about as you're running your business, starting it and running it. What are your expenses? How do you manage them? And what's fixed and what's variable?
So there's your Business 101 class, everyone. That was awesome. And I wish somebody had explained it that succinctly to me when I first started. Thinking about it as an accordion is a great way to think about it. I might steal that.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so as the name of the business is Pivot Global. So could you please explain for us what it means to pivot and what is the skill set needed to really embrace that pivot and be successful?
So as I envisioned the company and was deciding on a name, I thought, where are the gaps and what value can we bring the clients? And what I saw was, if it's just run of the mill, I'm trying to run my organization, it's not that. What I saw as opportunity is when organizations were at a critical point and they needed to do something different, they needed to go in a different direction. Let me give you examples of when that might happen. So you have a product, but it's not getting traction. So your sales are not what it needs to be. Or maybe in developing that product, your supply chain is an issue. The component parts needed to put it together have been faulty. So your building of the product is delayed. Maybe your quality is a concern. It could be that you are misaligned with the market. So you're talking about your product one way, but consumers think about it in a different way, right? So what is that market alignment? It could be that you have talent, but they're not working in a way that works well. So you haven't defined what people need to do. They're confused. They're stumbling over each other. Or you haven't thought about the handoffs around how people work, right? So that whole process around how people work, if you can't get that right, you can have great talent, great product, but you can't get stuff done. So I realize it's these pivots where people have a problem, they need to go in a different direction. That was important. Now, the kinds of pivots that we do, there's an innovation pivot, and I call it big I and little I, right? So this is where we find many organizations are trying to bring in new ideas, new ways of working, and they're not quite sure how to do that. So we focus on people, equipping them to be able to innovate. And there are certain skills around that and skills that you enhance. And then the process, giving them the environment in which they innovate. So now they're able to bring more momentum. We focus on leadership pivots. So that's helping individual leaders know their strengths, their areas of opportunity, coaching them, working on development plans, making them better leaders, having that same information for the teams, because teams are how the work gets done, and being able to work with them to accelerate. And then in the diversity, inclusion, and equity space, helping organizations know if what they're doing is working, crafting some new things if it's not, and knowing that they have to have their leaders ready to deliver on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that they've got to be so tied to the community, right? Because this is about being socially responsible. So when you look at those pivots, we found that these are ones that every organization finds important today. And let's talk about skills then that are needed to deliver on those pivots, right? Fundamentally, in every organization that we work with, and in our own organization, it comes back to people. So for my folks that are delivering our services to our clients, I have to know that one, they've got great expertise in these three pivot areas that I mentioned, vertical skills, right? I've got to know that they have the utmost professionalism and integrity when they're working with a client, and that I can leave them unaided working with a client, and they're going to develop them and nurture that relationship in the way that we would expect. So they bring a lot, and they learn how we do business within Pivot and within design agility. And those are the skills I'm looking for. When you think about what's happening in our client organizations, they absolutely are looking for folks that are leaders. What does that mean? You're bringing curiosity. You're bringing problem solving skills. You're bringing tenacity. You're bringing the ability to work with others, to influence outcomes, to manage conflict, to strategize, right? There are so many different skills that you can think about. And depending on the job, there are proficiency levels, right? So let's say that I am looking for someone who can lead a team. And it may be that I've got a lower level role that kind of is the beginning managerial role. And maybe you have 4 or 5 people, and the complexity of what you're doing allows you to learn these skills in this first role. And now you move to kind of the middle manager level role, right? Maybe the same skills are needed, but a higher level of skill. And at the senior level, same skills needed around leading a team, but it's very different because it has more of a strategy component to it. It's tied to setting operating priorities and the systems everybody needs in that organization to operate. So you just think simply around key skills, and I need to be really good at those skills at different levels as I move through my career. That is typically what we see.
I feel like this flows really well into talking about your book, and I want to get to that.
Cool.
So, okay, Cynthia has a new book out. It came out a couple of days ago, but as of yesterday, it's on Amazon
Amazon
and
and Barnes and Noble and
Amazon
Author.
and Barnes and Noble. It is called Crossing Meridians. And could you tell us a little bit about what you mentioned it before? What is the book about? And then I want to get into the writing process a little bit, but please
Okay.
tell us what it's about a little bit.
Yes, so the title is Crossing Meridians. Subtitle is Engineering Disruption to Become a More Effective Leader. That's the heart of the book. So imagine what I said to you about career, a path, moving through different roles, but not having really any view of how you do that. So in hindsight, I now look back and I think I have something to say and something to share around how it is that as an aspiring to mid-career leader, you think about where you are and where you want to go, and you build a path to move you along acquiring the skills that are important. Now, I say that, and I use a metaphor from the world of navigation, maritime navigation. So, a meridian is a longitude, north south, and you travel on that, and you are on that path when you navigate, and you don't step off of it, right? And we're on those pathways in life, some set prescribed way that we have grown up and that we navigate and that we think and that we operate. To become a more effective leader, you've got to step off of that path. You've got to engineer disruption in a self-directed way to come off of what you know, what's familiar, to be uncomfortable and move to the unfamiliar. And you've got to do that with riskier, more complex actions that you take that will help you gain specific skills. And so, what I do in the book is walk you through a process where you discover, you envision, you plan, you act, you repeat to envision where you want to go, decide what steps you need to take, experiment and learn, and you keep repeating it. And in doing that, you move from what I call your beginning meridians, which are the influences that we all have that we bring into the workplace that defines who you are. And then you decide what your new meridians are. And then you decide how you're going to cross the divide between the two, engineering how you're going to do that. And an important part is I encourage everybody to make sure the actions they take are calibrated to developing their prime meridian of leadership. Prime meridian is like the anchor, it's ballast, right? That keeps you steady. And I think, and I don't see this as much as I'd like to see in leaders, but I think it's so important as you're developing your leadership is to ensure everything you do helps you build and reinforce empathy, openness, and resiliency. And if you have been intentional about how you're developing as a leader, and you also have these embedded skills, you are incredibly valuable to the organization. And you're doing what I call flying then, right? So my passion is seeing aspiring to mid-career leaders who start with what they have, intentionally work on development, and then they can fly. They really do some amazing things in their career. Now, that's my personal perspective. From a individual perspective, as a leader, what you've done through this is you've created mobility. You've given yourself the ability to move through different roles, to have mobility across your career. And from the organization's perspective, you now have some very special skills at a time when the organization needs special skills because it's so challenged around social justice, racial justice. And it takes leaders who have crossed divides, who have a different way of thinking, right? Who are thinking as larger leaders and have tried some things differently to step up and help organizations come up with creative solutions that stick around environmental, social, racial justice. So that's the core of the book and the processes I've laid out and why I think it's so important.
Why is so important. There's a great book, Start with Why, that also like hones in on this. But what would you say your purpose is?
My purpose has become very clear to me over time. In the book, I actually share how I defined it clearly, because I do share with everyone that you have to dial into your purpose as you're developing as a leader. It's not some abstract thing only related to work. It's the core of who you are as a person. And so for me, I was asked to talk to some emerging leaders a few years ago, and they wanted me to talk about what's success. So I wound up only putting one slide up, and it took me a while to define it. But when I did it, I realized that this is at its core who I am and what motivates me and my purpose. And I said that success for me is a combination of equal parts passion and compassion. The passion is the drive to do everything that you do with excellence. The compassion is an equal measure of an understanding that we all are responsible for helping those that are disadvantaged and lifting them up. And so for me, it's this equal measure of passion and compassion that drives me. So how does that show up? Let's say that I'm involved in various ventures at different times, and let's say a proposal is put forward, and it's so clear to me that this new company is going to have direct impact on people. It's going to help with access to education, access to jobs, improving the economics of those that are disadvantaged, maybe housing. If there is direct impact that allows people to be lifted up, I'm all in and I'm really happy. So there is business that's doing good and concretely doing good for people. Now, it may not be a direct connection, but maybe what I see is that through a foundation or through philanthropy, indirectly, this business venture is also benefiting people. Mm-hmm. Guess what? That also can play to my passion and purpose, right? The passion and the compassion. If it is strictly about business, I'm probably less interested in it. And that's evolved for me over time, right? Because I'm so clear about what matters and who matters. And how can I help to create an environment where passion, fueled by compassion, allows me to do good with business and by our people? That's how I think about it.
I think it's so important what you just said. Your purpose, and you don't have to know exactly what that is, but a lot of what Cynthia has said today is really look inward and be honest with yourself, because your purpose can evolve, and it should evolve over the course of your life, right? The purpose starting out might be like what Cynthia said. I just need a job so I can pay rent. Like, that's my purpose right now. I need to survive. But then it evolves over time, and that's okay. It's going to change. And so don't be alarmed by that. So I think that's such an incredible message.
Well, thank you. And to your point, that evolution is important. If you continue to learn, you will continue to evolve. So what's important to you today is going to change tomorrow, and that's all good. But what happens is you begin to build a base of skills and knowledge and professionalism and networks that all build over time to make you who you are. And that's going to shape what you become. So yes, that evolution and ongoing learning, I think, is so important.
Yes. We have a lot of questions coming in, so I can't take all your time, apparently. This is for students. So Leah actually has a question about the writing process, and she wants to better understanding what your book writing process looked like.
So this is hi Leah, and this was my first time writing a book. So I think when I sit back and evaluate it, I probably will give you a more thorough answer. But right now, I realized, having now moved into the marketing mode, that there have been three phases. The first was four phases. The first was the ideation. So what is it that I wanted to write about, and why was it important to me? The second was the actual writing, the shaping of it. I used an outline that I developed. I worked in Scrivener. There are a lot of different things. Some people use Word. I use the Scrivener package, and it worked great because I could move. It's like moving stickies around, right? So I needed flexibility to move content and see it. So it was a great writing tool. in that writing process, I also had early readers. So I didn't want to just take a manuscript and then say, hey, it's ready to be published. And I picked early readers who had different connections with me. My older brother was able to make sure factually the things I was describing, because I do talk about my own personal journey crossing meridians, and I have a lot of anecdotes and stories, but he kept me honest.
As only a brother can.
Right? It takes that. So you have to think about the different perspectives people will bring as early readers. So I used them and they were great. In the what I call that process of writing, I also had a wonderful editor who was also a writing coach. I learned so much from her around the voice and how you shape it, and how you write from the heart, but how you write in a way that readers have an appetite for. And then the third phase is the production phase. And I learned this is where, as an author, you always have to ensure you inspect what you expect. Every single period, dot, placement, whatever it is, you've got to make sure that this is what you expect. You people will do a great job, but your eyes have to be on everything, and you demand perfection here. So I learned that in the production phase. And now the marketing phase. So we've been working on marketing, and I quite honestly am racing to catch up, because we're doing multi-channel marketing in a way that I knew nothing about, and it's all coming together and I'm learning. So an example, we certainly will have a press release. We'll have Google ads that run for a period of time, and we're staging things. We'll have Facebook ad, IG ad, we'll have a YouTube video, all in the social space. We have influencers that will be on the book, and they have campaigns. And so that's a different world. I will be doing a series of podcast interviews over several months, establishing both thought leadership and information about the book is out there. We're doing multiple things, and we'll evaluate each of these to decide where do we get more traction, do more of this, don't try this anymore. And so there are a number of things I don't know anything about when it comes to book marketing, but I'm willing to learn. So,
and ask for help.
That's exactly it. So I love Kashi, you're there, which is my last point. And I've been asking, calling in a whole lot of chits and saying, I have no clue what I'm doing. But people have been wonderful at helping me to understand these different phases. And I've been able to tap, for instance, an amazing group of professionals. I had an illustrator, 23-year-old SCAD grad here in Atlanta. And boy, I said, I need a killer cover. And she nailed it. And boy, I learned so much from her. And she also did the interior graphics. I'm so pleased. But I also learned so much from her. I learned from the editor, right? What are the key people that you need in order to produce a quality book that speaks to a need? And for us, is a marketing tool to the business, right? So I also had to learn, and I'm still learning, how do you put those pieces together? And then how do you have a team of people that are running really hard with you on this? I have senior advisors that work with me within our business pivot global. One of them was an early reader for the book. He also has helped me think about the connection between the book and Pivot, and how we convert business for Pivot based on the book, right? So how you put the pieces together, other people have experiences that you won't know and you can't see. But when you ask for help, it's amazing. So I certainly have been doing that with the book. So Leah, thank you for that question.
Yeah. And, another thing that Cynthia just mentioned, which I'm a big proponent of, is asking questions. You cannot learn unless you pipe up and ask a question.
That's right.
The more you learn, the more informed your questions become. But that's also a trait of leadership, right? You ask the right questions at the right time to help move the process forward. So constant learning in all kinds of ways.
I found, Kashi, on this point, I do talk about this a little bit in the book, but I found that the best leaders are those who don't have to know all the answers. Especially early on as a leader, I found that I mentor a lot of people, hired a lot of people, right? Helped to groom leaders, and getting to a space where it's okay to say you don't know something is really important. As you
Mhm.
move through leadership, it's really important to know the best leaders are those who are assembling amazing talent and they know how to have this team working symbiotically and they empower them to do some good stuff. And the reason you do that is because not everybody knows everything. So you want to draw from the best of what everybody can bring.
Right.
And I think it's so important. So you start with yourself, recognizing this is what I'm great at, where I'm developing, and where I'm no good. And so, what does that mean? And how do you then enhance a team? And as you're leading, it's just having that level of awareness is so important because the higher you go, the quite honestly, it's not you individually that's delivering; it's your team. So you've got to think in that way to be able to mobilize a team and get them to do some really good stuff.
Absolutely. I have a lot more thoughts on this, but we also have a lot more questions. So
Okay.
I'm going to move on. Um, Ashley wants to know, what is the biggest pivot or change you have had to make that you didn't realize was coming?
Can you ask Ashley if she's talking personally or professionally?
I think either. I can
Okay.
ask, but yeah, or both. How
So,
about one of each?
so let me just start at a personal level, but it's also professional. And it was a choice, but it was huge. So as I said, you started out, I'm an attorney and I started out practicing law. I was in an organization in a legal role in a company, having been at a law firm. And at that time, the company was looking for people from non-traditional roles, not necessarily in a business role, who would be considered for general manager roles, which meant that they would be running the profit and loss. So they were basically running the business. Now I'm in a legal role, loving it here, and I'd have to start over here. I thought, well, why would I want to do that? Eventually, I did make the move. High risk because I had to start over totally. But what I did was think about how I could partner with people, again, asking for help, who were great at the skills that I did not have that were important to be successful in business. And there were three individuals. And so I thought about what I knew that I could offer them that would help them, and then how I could absorb because I had to learn and perform at an accelerated pace in this job, right? And I was not looking back. So my intention was I needed to be successful, but this transition moving from law into business was probably the biggest kind of career move. And I had to learn skills. So an example is early on, so I'm managing a team for the first time. And in a legal role, you don't do that, right? It's what you are doing yourself.
Mhm.
So a manager said to me earlier on, you know, you guys are getting stuff done. I know you're managing a team for the first time, but you're killing these people. And I think, and so this manager said, you're used to, all night, whatever it takes as a lawyer, but people have lives. And so you have to, lead differently. And it was just an awakening because it was a different skill, like moving into leadership that required a sensitivity to others, like working differently, dispersing the work, having a work day, right? And then there is time at home, right? All of that was just very different than how lawyers were operating. That
Mhm.
transition
It's
to
billable
leadership
hours, right?
happened really
And
fast, but it also was because one, I had a leader who gave me great feedback, and I needed to then figure out what adjustments I needed to make really quickly in order to be a leader in the business environment, which was foreign to me. So, probably the biggest adjustment I'd say there.
very interesting. Okay, Carrie would like to know about mentors. So,
Yeah.
how has mentoring played a role in your life? I think you've spoken a little bit about this. And who are your mentors?
Oh, wow. I wouldn't be where I am without mentors. So I grew up in a housing project in Mississippi. the middle of 7 kids. My mom worked as a maid for white families, and we were very poor. And she, this is an environment where there's an expectation of excellence when you have nothing. But your happiness isn't tied to money. But coming out of the civil rights movement and a lot of hard work, that had to pay dividends, right? People weren't demanding rights for us to squander that. So I still, even with the high expectations, could not have done what I've done, which is maybe a 1 in a million chance, for which I'm grateful, without help. And so whether I call them mentors or angels, I have plenty. I'll give you one example. In the 5th grade, I had a teacher who understood we were still at a point where it was integration, but not very far past it. And there was a talented and gifted program that was just opening up, and there were not any other African American students that were in it. Although the school system, a third of the school system was Black. So she understood I was going to be going into this program, but there were things that I needed to know. So she asked my mom, could I, on Tuesdays and Thursdays after school, stay and help her grade papers? I never graded a single paper. I had these lessons from her that were things that she knew I needed to know in order to move into a talented and gifted program. They're just, some of them were just basic life things, right? So doing well academically was not going to be enough. And she, for that year, invested in me. She also said to my mom, well, can she come over to help clean on Saturday mornings? I would go, but I never cleaned. She would, she expected me to have read the newspaper and to have an opinion about things and debate her. She would spin the globe and wherever it would land. We didn't have encyclopedias at our home, which she knew, and I'd use hers. And I'd come up with a report and I'd talk to her about it. And she would build on that knowledge. My mom had taught us certainly etiquette, but we didn't have a full set of plates or anything like that. And she did. So she would always have lunch on Saturday with place settings, right? Because she knew these were all things that weren't taught in the classroom. They were deficits and they were important for me. She is the best example I could give you of the mentor / angel. And I've had many, many of them, including today. I have an amazing set. I talked about advisors I have for the business. These are people who invest in our success and they don't have to. I have colleagues and friends, and I'm very fortunate to have an amazing group of people still who are invested in my promise to them is that I will pay it forward. And I try to do that because you can never have just a one-way relationship where you're taking and taking and taking. It doesn't work. You've got to know that you're putting something in the pot and the level is rising in the pot because of your largesse. And as a professional, you've always got to think about it being a two-way relationship. So I try to make sure it is.
Yeah. And I love that example from your childhood. You talked earlier about expecting a lot of yourself and really being honest with yourself about what you're good at and what you're not. And that also comes from having people that will hold you accountable and expect a lot of you. And so when you're choosing your mentors or your advisors, make sure you choose people that make you a little uncomfortable, right? In a good way, because you want people to expect a lot out of you, and that's how you continue to push yourself. So, I love that example so much.
Go back to the concept in the book, right? Which is through discomfort you develop.
Yep.
Move from the familiar and the known to the uncomfortable and the unfamiliar. And a sponsor, an advocate, a mentor is going to help you do just that. Because if all you do is stay where you are and say, I am really strong. Let's say, for instance, I've got really strong analytical skills. And if all I do is hone those and I don't do anything else, I may forever be an awesome analyst, but I may never be a leader who could lead a department of analysts, who could take insights from analysis and turn those into products and services. It's my choice, right? But if I want to transition, those mentors, advocates, those that are helping you are going to push to say, we're going to build on what you do incredibly well. We're going to add in experiences that allow you to gain some leadership experience here. And now you've got opportunity to be mobile as a leader, building on what's great. And they're going to push you and have some expectations of you, and they're going to want to see progress. That's what a good mentor is going to do for you.
Absolutely. We are quickly running out of time. We have so many questions, Cynthia. I can't even tell you. But we're going to get to one more, and then we're just going to invite Cynthia back to have part 2 of this conversation with us.
I'd love to come back. Yeah.
Okay. So I think let's end on this one. There's so many good ones. Okay. Tracy wants to know, how did you decide what to do? How did you decide what to do, and how did you know you were making the right decision? So I guess with your career, like, how did you know to become a lawyer?
Yeah. So Tracy, everything I did initially was out of necessity. I didn't know about a career plan. No one in my family had graduated from college. I didn't know about hours in college or a curriculum and how you put together a selection around majors to get to where you want to go. When you're operating out of a place of survival, you make some decisions, and sometimes they're not the best ones, but you learn from them. But you do get to a place where you become more informed and more measured. So initially, I was stumbling, right? I was an economics major, quite honestly, because I loved it in high school, right? The fact that it's in business, it combines a number of things. It requires maybe a different. I love statistics, right? A level of thinking that's both quant focused, but also kind of policy and externally focused is what I like. And I had no clue that you could get a PhD in this at all. I didn't know anything. I didn't know where I grew up. There were no Black lawyers, right? There were teachers, preachers, maybe a few business owners, but the people that I'm talking about as PhDs in economics or attorneys just didn't exist in my world. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't making a decision based on something I had seen. I truly was stumbling. And I then was able to, having gotten into a position to honestly observe, see who was good at what they did, why I thought they were good, right? And then have great mentors, and then ask for help, because there was huge deficit just around in the business world, right? Lingo I didn't know. When I went to law school, I felt like I was so behind because so many of my classmates had generations of lawyers in their family, right? Mm-hmm. There was just the whole world of law and professions and how you talk about it and decisions. I didn't know what they were talking about. So when you're in that situation, you're playing catch up in a lot of ways. But you do get to a point where you now have a base from which you can operate. And then you begin to make decisions about what is of interest. And so it's not about survival and what you have to do, but it's what you choose to do. And so in part, that's why I wrote the book, right? So people can be a lot more intentional about this path than I was. But I also found that the sooner you make decisions based on your sense of passion and purpose, the happier you are. I didn't learn that for a long time. So I was doing a lot of jobs that I just had to do, but I wasn't necessarily happy with them. Now I'm in a very different place. But I'm glad you did ask this question, because I think it's so important. The more you know and the earlier you know it, the better you're able to make decisions that are right for you. Mm-hmm. And I think I would say for you guys as students in your generation, I'm most impressed because I think you are doing this out of the gate. You're finding what's important to you and what you're passionate about. You're creating careers that exactly match that. And you don't think differently about whether you should do it or not. For us, it wasn't that. It was just, I need a job. I don't care what I'm doing. I just got to have a job. And then it was down the road that you figured out, well, maybe I should be doing something that is more like what I'm really passionate about. So I see the difference, and I think it's so much better. And if you're dialed into intention, knowing yourself more, having feedback mechanisms that help you understand and be aware of your strengths, and then trying some things and having people that help you, you've got a way of developing as a person and as a leader that's unique to you, with kind of a safety net around you as you're growing and becoming who you really want to be.
What a great note to leave it on. Cynthia, we are just so thrilled that you spent this hour with us, just about.
Oh,
Uh,
delighted.
next, do you have any parting thoughts for our students before we close out the show?
I would just simply say, ask for help, be true to who you are. I think if you, I'm going to plug the book now, if you go to Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, Crossing Meridians, Engineering Disruption to Become a More Effective Leader, the book is written for people like you and those that have are in the earlier stages of their career. But it's also for organizations, because I think they can invest in their folks, right, and in their leaders and in their development. So, and if you do that, I'd love to hear from you on what you think about it. But from a career standpoint, you're at an important point, right? You spend a lot of money to go to school. You're spending a lot of time on it. Right now, everything is so hypercritical, and there's a lot that may not be defined, and that's okay. You don't have to know everything right now, and you don't have to have every element lined up for your future path. What you have to know is what sings to you in your heart and your soul around where you may want to spend your time for the next 30 years. And you don't have to have 30 years planned out. You just have to make a good decision about the next year or two. And
Yep.
then you have to think about how you put together the building blocks that move you on a path that's true to you, that makes you feel like I'm spending my time in a good way every single day. I'm building skills. And whatever that sense of purpose is, you're living into it. Remember, I said mine is both having the passion and the compassion in equal measure. And that drives everything I do. I didn't get to clarity around that until maybe 10 years ago. I wish I had it sooner. So hopefully you can have that clarity and have that guide everything that you do.
Awesome. And of course, we will link to the book in our show notes so y'all can we'll make it really easy and you can just click on over from there. Obviously, we'll link to Cynthia. So if you have questions specifically for her, maybe you can reach her on LinkedIn. And okay, that's all we have this week, folks. So next week, we have an amazing show, as always. My friend David Lightburn is going to be joining us. He is the president and co-founder of a co-working space here in Atlanta called Atlanta Tech Village. It is the fourth largest co-working space in the country. It is ginormous, and I am a member, founding member. So we're going to talk to him next week and talk about community and tech and all those things. Remember to sign up for our mailing list because we've got scholarships and grants and internships and all kinds of things for you guys. And so we send that out by email. So please sign up. And we will see you next week. So remember to have a great week. Remember, it's a blessing to be a blessing. And stay safe and healthy. Have a great weekend. See y'all next week. Bye.